no one, in the village of Wanjala, knew where Father Abednego came from. They only knew that one morning, after a great storm that lasted 3 days, he appeared on the road, littered with dead birds, his robe drenched, holding a silver staff, his eyes lowered, but not a single drop of rain on his face. From that day on, he preached as if God was speaking through his lips to the villagers. The crippled walked, the mute spoke. A woman who had been barren for over 8 years became pregnant after only 2 private confessions with the Father. A miracle, perhaps, a cloud of smoke hiding something rotten beneath. One day, he declared, "God appeared in my dream. He said that a woman's soul must be purified before she can open her heart to life." Thus, the rite of purity was born. Each girl in the village, once she reached puberty, would be called before the whole village. And that night, she would have to enter the small room behind the church, a place no one had ever entered, except him. No Bible, no prayer, only the flickering light of a candle, the smell of sweat, fresh blood, and the sound of heavy breathing behind a thick door. After the offering, the girls were said to have been touched by God. But strangely, they no longer looked anyone in the eye. They smiled, but their hands trembled. One girl vomited bird feathers. Another sat up in the middle of the night, scratching at her throat, as if trying to pull something out from inside. In the village, there was one mother who dared to refuse the rite of purity. She hid her daughter up in the mountains. 3 days later, the girl returned, her body covered in sores, walking on her knees, mouth calling Father Abednego's name over and over like a puppet with broken strings. After that, no one dared resist. The first rite of purity for Tinashe took place in an eerie atmosphere. The young girl, beautiful, with clear eyes and skin as smooth as a flower's petal, stood in the village like a sheep led to slaughter. Father Abednego stood on the pulpit, his gaze cold, as if he were a shadow from hell. "It's time for you to be purified, my dear child," Father Abednego whispered, his voice deep and full of power. Tinashe entered the dark purification room, where only a faint candlelight provided illumination. Father Abednego stood there, his eyes wanting to devour her, holding a tightly clenched Bible. The air was so thick that she could almost smell the mildew and blood in the cold room. Father Abednego stepped closer, placing his hand on Tinashe's shoulder, cold as stone. She collapsed onto the bed set up for the purification. "Don't speak, you will be saved by God," Father Abednego whispered into her ear. A scream rang out in the darkness, but it was not Tinashe's. "Purification is pain, my child," he said, and with that, the rite of purity was completed by dawn. When the villagers arrived, the door to the purification room was open, but no one knew what had happened to Tinashe. She was no longer there. All they heard were the sighs of the spirits echoing in the air. The bone bead necklace lay shattered on the ground, as if her soul had been stolen forever. Father Abednego merely said, "It's the process of purification. One must suffer to be saved." And after each rite of purity, the villagers received news of blessings. Bountiful harvests, the blind seeing again, barren women suddenly becoming pregnant. The villagers increasingly believed in God and in his salvation during each prayer. And Father Abednego continued, consuming each virgin's soul, like a man, starving who could never be full. On the nights of the purifications, it was said that you could hear the cries of children echoing from the stone walls as if souls that hadn't yet been born were being devoured alive. The villagers believed he was doing God's will. But no one asked, if this truly comes from God, then why does it smell like dead bodies beneath the altar? And so the rites continued. The villagers still came, they still offered their daughters, and Father Abednego still smiled, while something behind him licked its lips with a blood-soaked tongue. Amina wasn't just beautiful, she was a beauty that defied all boundaries. Her skin was like the golden sands of the Nile, warm yet kissed by the moonlight. Her eyes were deep, as if they could see right through another's soul. Her jet-black hair flowed down to her back, like a river winding around the roots of an ancient tree. Each smile of hers was light cutting through the darkness, and each silence felt like a challenge. All the young men in the village longed for her, but she never bowed her head to anyone's gaze. She was like the only flower blooming on the edge of a deep abyss, just like her mother. while the villagers of Wanjala bowed their heads in awe of the blessings brought by Father Abednego. At the far edge of the village, beneath a roof of banana leaves and whispers, a girl named Amina was growing up like a lotus in the mud, quiet, watchful, and untouched by illusion. She had no mother. They said her mother was one of the first girls to be purified, but after that sacred night, she no longer spoke, she no longer laughed. She breathed, she walked, but her soul had vanished like morning mist. One day, she simply stopped. Amina was raised by her grandmother, Mama Zawadi, an old woman with a bent back, silver hair like smoke, and eyes long blind, yet sharp enough to see the things others chose to ignore. Each night while the village slept, Mama Zawadi would sit by the fire and braid Amina's hair, whispering stories of the ancestors, of warrior women who could speak to snakes, of mothers who lulled their babies to sleep in the language of the wind, and of a time when a girl's soul was sacred and no man dared touch it without heaven's permission. And Amina listened. Until one day, the village drum beat 3 slow thuds. People gathered. The sky bled crimson. And from the church steps, Father Abednego raised his hand and read the name. The next to receive God's blessing is Amina, daughter of Nyasha. The silence that followed was heavy, like the pause before a landslide. Mama Zawadi took Amina by the hand. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply pulled her granddaughter back into their hut and waited for nightfall. That evening, the air was still. No wind, no birds. Even the trees held their breath. Mama Zawadi reached into an old wooden chest and pulled out something wrapped in tattered red cloth, a bone bead necklace, so old that moss had begun to cling between the joints. Each bead belongs to a woman of our bloodline, she whispered. But the 7th bead belongs to Tandala, a girl sacrificed wrongly. Her spirit still wanders, waiting for someone to call her back. If evil touches you, she said, placing it around Amina's neck, squeeze the 7th bead. She will come, and you will not be alone. That night, Amina didn't sleep. She heard the wind breathing through the cracks in the walls. She felt the ground hum beneath her mat. Just before dawn, she saw a girl in a ceremonial white dress standing outside the hut. Pale face, hollow eyes, lips moving silently. Don't let him touch you. Then she vanished, like a breath swallowed by the dark. At sunrise, Amina stood before the church. The door opened slowly, groaning like a dying animal. Inside, only darkness, and a bell tolling low and long, as if it had been buried underground and was ringing from beneath the earth. And then, a voice. Not from behind the door, not from the walls, from inside her own skull. I've been waiting for you. Did you hear that? The wind has changed, and what breathes inside that church is not God. That night, the sky seemed to forget it existed. No moon, no stars, only a thick blackness like burnt ink pouring down over the stone church roof. Amina stood before the heavy wooden door, the same door so many girls had walked through, never to speak of what happened inside. Her hands trembled, but the bone bead necklace from Mama Zawadi still rested quietly on her chest, the 7th bead cold as a spirit holding its breath with her. You are not alone. Her grandmother had told her. The door creaked open, groaning like the cry of old wood forced to move. Then, slowly, it opened. A cold breath of air rushed from within, hitting her face. It wasn't like wind. It was alive. It had intent. Amina stepped inside. Inside, it was pitch dark, with only a single candle flickering in the middle of the round stone room. In that dim light sat Father Abednego, not the kind, gentle preacher from the daylight hours. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, his smile breathless, and his right hand, the one he always kept covered in a black glove, was bare now, revealing a long, thin, deformed hand, covered in tiny, blinking red eyes. Amina, he called, his voice rumbling not from his mouth, but from deep within his chest. Come here, it's time for your blessing. Amina didn't move, her heart pounded, like the drums that call the dead. And as that monstrous hand reached out, only inches from her skin, she clenched the 7th bead. Boom. The ground shook as if something ancient had been awakened from beneath the earth. From the necklace, a burst of cold white smoke spiraled out, wrapping around Amina before spreading across the entire room. Wind roared up from the stone floor, a wind with no source. The candle hissed and died. And in the darkness, voices rose, young, female, broken, but not afraid. Give us back our bodies. You called us offerings, but the true God never asked to feed on virgin flesh. A flash of light struck, and shadows appeared on the walls. They were the ghosts of the girls who had once been purified, hair matted, blood crusted at their throats, hands trembling, but their eyes burned like fire. They walked toward Father Abednego. He screamed. But it was no longer a man's scream. It was brick scraping, cloth ripping, the sound of a demon roaring through holy skin. He tried to run, but the stone floor cracked, and from it, skeletal hands shot up, grabbing his legs, pulling him, dragging him back into the earth. You preached justice in the blood of daughters. Now go, back to the place that lent you power to begin with. Father Abednego vanished. The room burst into light, and then exploded in silence. When the villagers came running, they found only Amina standing in the ruins of the collapsed church, holding the half-burned necklace in her hand. No tears, no fear, only a small line of blood on her wrist, right where the seventh bead had once rested. And from that day forward, the people no longer followed any voice blindly, just because it claimed to speak for God. Because now they understood, if faith goes blind, one day, evil will wear holy robes and take the pulpit. The next morning, the sun rose slowly, like an old man waking from a long, strange dream. The birds didn't sing. The wind held its breath. And one by one, the villagers of Wanjala gathered, drawn to the church after hearing the distant, bone-deep roar the night before. But the church was gone. No roof, no walls, no holy cross. Only a deep pit, blackened ash, and the acrid smell of something burnt, mixed with the faint trace of ancient incense. At the center of the pit lay a broken bone bead necklace. The seventh bead, the one Tandala once inhabited, had shattered into white dust, forming a spiral, like a seal, left behind by justice older than any book of scripture. Amina stood beside it. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stared far and deep, as if she was still listening to voices no one else could hear. A small child asked, "Where's Father Abednego?" An old woman replied, "He preached too close to the mouth of the devil, and one day even the devil believed he was one of its own." From that day on, the people of Wanjala never built another church. They no longer needed someone to speak to the divine on their behalf. They lit fires under the stars, they told stories to their children, and they learned to pray with their actions, not just their words. As for Amina, she became the fire keeper, the one who would tell this story again and again, not to scare, but to awaken. The lessons etched into the earth. When a man wears holy robes and asks you to undress, when he says he loves but drains you of your breath, when he speaks in God's name but demands offerings of flesh, look at him with the eyes of your ancestors and ask, who is really speaking? Not every miracle falls from the sky. Some are just shadows that have learned to speak like angels. Faith without awareness is a blade you hand to the smiling man in the dark. And remember, your ancestors never needed an interpreter. They left behind their seeds in your blood, fire in your words, and justice in your bones. All you need is to listen. This story is not just about Wanjala. It could happen anywhere. Power meets blind devotion. Ask yourself, am I following the light, or am I just closing my eyes? And now pass this flame on, because somewhere out there, another church still stands, and another soul still waits to be heard. Dear friends, what do you think about this story? Was it truly light, or darkness disguised in holy robes? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit like if you found it gripping, and subscribe so you don't miss the next mysterious ancient drama. Amina will return with fire and secrets that have never been told.